Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, thanks for being here. It's been 2 weeks of this project, which I am now calling the forum. Really, this channel is meant to be a place of these daily videos where I'm working through the challenges of life and relationships on my personal quest to build a meaningful life. And that's genuine. There are a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to work through, and I just felt that there needs to be a place for us to discuss those things. And so for now, this is that. So today, in today's video, I want to continue on this theme of diversity that I've been talking about for the last couple of days. Personally, I've benefited tremendously from a life that has been exposed and integrated in diverse environments. The first two videos that I covered on this, I shared a lot about those experiences and went more in depth in them. How I've had the opportunity to travel to over 40 countries in the world. I studied in Eastern Europe. Had the opportunity to live in Malaysia for 6 years. I have a multicultural marriage, and my wife and I have done our best to develop a culture in our home that gives our kids what we feel is the best from both the East and the West. So I also shared on this in the last video, so in the third video that I made on this, that diversity has given me an opportunity to understand the love of God in a deeper way than if I was trying to understand Him on my own. And because of this, honestly, my life has been incredibly rich in understanding who God is and the great love that He has, and how that has made my life incredibly more meaningful. But today, what I want to do is I want to talk about why diversity is so hard. Why are there so many challenges around race, around culture in our society today? And I'm speaking from an American, and speaking about a U.S. context. But honestly, as I travel throughout the world, racism, um, whatever label that you want to put it, there are discrimination, whatever it may be. There are issues of racism, of discrimination in every country of the world. And so the issues that we're dealing with here in the United States are resonate around the world, with every country. As in every country, in every area of society, there are different groups of people that are living in close proximity with one another, and that's what creates these tensions. And so for me, within a diverse context, my ideal, what I see as my personal ideal, is integration, right? And what I mean by that is that there is this curiosity to learn about the differences of one another, right? Just curious to see there is something that's different than what I know, and I want to know that more. And then that curiosity grows into an understanding of those differences when they're tried to be learned. And that understanding then grows into an appreciation and even a celebration of those differences, to where ultimately people are acquiring and even integrating those celebrated differences into their own life. I mean, in my mind, that's the ideal. And that's what it's been in my experience in my own life, and what I have tried to do in integrating the best of the values and behaviors and things that I've learned in the cultures that I've visited and have been a part of. So if integration is this ideal that has given me so much benefit in my life, and meaning, and has grown me as a person, and has made life better, in my opinion, for myself, has made my family relationships better, even with my own family, by bringing in values that my wife has and her family has taught me, then why doesn't it happen, right? Why doesn't integration happen in its best sense? And in my opinion, is because diversity is hard. Diversity is hard, and integration is something that intentionally needs to happen. And it's not something that's naturally desired, and not something that naturally happens in the course of our life. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, I think people naturally gravitate towards people who are like them. Honestly, there's a desire within us to have a deeper interconnection with other people. And it's just it's and where I've seen this play out is where I've seen this play out is in a context where I have been, where there were, multiple different people from around the world speaking different languages, but all knew English and were living and working together. In one of these, in this situation where I was at, this is an English speaking environment. Again, people that are there have English may be their second, third, or fourth language that they speak. And in one of these like meet and greet sessions where new people were coming in, I saw two people connect. And when the one individual learned that the other was able to speak what we call their heart language, they were overcome with this emotion and were brought to tears because of how meaningful it was to have a connection with somebody that had such a deep connection to them, and 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 familiarity to what is at their core. So heart language in translation, in lingo, when anybody is trying to translate a book and get it, and it's a book that they want to inspire or create action or even bring some level of change in somebody's life, you want to be able to have that book communicate to them and what is their heart language. I mean, there's regional languages, Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, English, are regional languages that people will learn, even though they're in their that may be their second language, because that's the language of commerce and business. And so, in order to engage people in a regional area, they learn that trade language or that regional language there. But in their home, they may have a dialect or a very specific or a language that they have been brought up in within their home. And so maybe very few people speak that. In the world, you might not recognize this, but there is over 4,000 languages, and some would even say on the upwards of 7,000 languages throughout the world. That's a ton of languages. And so some of these are people groups that are incredibly small. And so in their homes, they are raised with this language, and what we call it their heart language. And if you were to go out and meet somebody that speaks that same language and you've been away from it for a long time, your heart just wells up with this incredible emotion, because there's that connection with something that is so familiar and so nostalgic, right? It's something that you grew up with. It's what your parents spoke to you in. For people like me that can observe this but can't experience it, the best thing I liken it to is going off to college or to uni. When you go off to college, you leave your home and you say you're living on campus and you're farther away, so you can't commute home for a weekend. And so a semester goes by, you're at school, and you're finally going to make your trip back home to be with your family. And when you arrive at home, your mom or your dad, cooks for you and brings you, like, it feeds you the dishes that you've always grown up with. And there is just this sense of comfort and home and just a wonderful feeling of having those comfort foods that you grew up with, right? And then if you meet somebody else that grew up in that same context and had experienced the same dish in their home, the type of connection you can have is like, of course, like there is this familiarity with one another and a connection because you share that thing that nobody else feels. I moved in when I lived in Malaysia for 6 years, and when I moved back to the United States, I moved to Southern California. Now, Southern California, all of it is this cosmopolitan place where there is so many different cultures and people and everything. It's an incredible place to be. When we moved in, though, the people that we connected with first to help us integrate and move in was the Malaysian community here. It turned out that a colleague that I worked with and ended up being a neighbor around the corner from me that originally was from Malaysia, and they had immigrated here and spent 30 years here or something like that, and have been here a long time. But their place of origin is the same place of origin as my wife. And so I came here to help. When we made the transition from Malaysia to the U.S., I came here early, about 6 to 8 weeks early, to be able to get a home in order, a car in order, and everything. And tried to meet as many people as I could to help with this transition. And so when my wife and kids came off the airplane, we were in that Malaysian home having a familiar steamboat or hot pot, whatever you want to call it, dish that's very Malaysian. With so my wife was able to come in with a lot of familiarity, and that transition coming in, not just because of that meal, but because of that relationship and other relationships that we had, were a huge settling thing for us, and was a significant reason why we were able to transition so well in coming back to the United States, is because we had those bonds with people that had th- uh, that were like us. Maybe not so much me. I mean, I had experienced that culture and become very familiar with it for 6 years, but especially for my wife, there was that connection. And so what I see is there is a natural tendency for us to be able to be drawn to people who are like us, not just necessarily the way that we look. I think that's the least amount of connection, but the depth of experiences and culture and music and food and the way we talk and their humor and what we believe, all those things, there is just a there is just a sense of being at home when you're around those things. And so naturally, people are going to be able to gravitate towards those. Personally, that's what I'm seeing. So going outside those comfort zones, going outside those comfort areas, is uncomfortable, right? And but for some, it's adventuresome. So I'm one of those people, and I think there's a lot of us, but there's actually few in percentage in comparison to the rest of the people throughout the world. There are a few adventuresome people that are gravitated towards the unknown, gravitate towards the different, and want to experience that and find such a rush. In my life, I don't think it was natural. I think I was thrown into that environment. I enjoyed it, and I just kept going after it, and country after country, every summer for during my adolescent years, and it just inculcated and created this desire for difference and experiencing those different things. But I don't think that's most people. I mean, 60% of Americans in the United States don't have a passport to visit, don't have a passport. So that means they don't have any plans to leave the country. So there isn't, there is this. I'm going to stay and I'm going to be here. So yeah, I think that's one thing that's working against us in trying to integrate. Second thing, the second thing is that the dominant culture in America, right, is the Caucasian culture, right? This European culture, because that's the largest group of people, I suppose. If you take all of Europe together and integrate them in the United States, uh, that is the largest aspect of American society today. And Caucasian Americans, 60%, this is my understanding, 60% of European immigrants to the United States were of German background. I'm one of those people, and in German, I'm not talking here about German nationals, at least for German Americans, of which my upbringing has been like, and for the majority of people that I knew that had that type of background, you know, uh, there is the culture of the German American way of life is that it's a friendly culture, it's a hardworking culture, but it's also a very private one. And so to come over to somebody's house is you'll have to you should be invited, or at least it should be planned that you're going to be coming over to their house. You just don't stop over uninvited and expect to be entertained or have a prolonged meeting and time together. That's not true in a lot of different cultures in the United States, or backgrounds, and throughout much of the world. There's this idea that you are welcome to come over. My door is always open. Um, but that's not a general experience. And coming into Southern California, uh, that those doors weren't open to us. Even people that looked like me, right? It was very difficult to be able to get to know people because you had to either have a reason why you were connecting with them, or it had to be a functional event that had some sort of functional purpose to come over to their house, or or we met outside at a restaurant just to connect. And uh, and so that's why even this idea, think about Starbucks coffee, and they were the front runners in terms of developing what they call the third space. You have your work, your home, and this third space, which ended up for some people it's the church, or a religious religious institution that you go to, or a club. But for a lot of people in America, it was the coffee house or the pub and the bar. It's these places where you go to meet up with people that's not at work, it's not at home, because you don't invite people over to your house. So we need another place that we can all go to be able to socialize and meet each other. I had this meme one time that got passed to me, and it talked about, it was all text, and it said, translation for non-Americans. And one of them was, "Hey, we should get coffee sometime." And the translation for that was, "Hey, I really like you. Goodbye." And there was another one. It's like, "Hey, I should have you over at dinner sometime." And the translation of that was, "I really, really like you. Goodbye." It's this idea that uh, we're really friendly people. Customer service in the United States is better than anywhere else in the world. The idea that customer is king and that we'll go out of our way to be able to help them is tremendous in the United States. I remember I had such miserable banking experiences in Malaysia. I would just get so angry walking in there because I knew it was going to be a negative experience for me. But I would call the American bank on the phone, and there was almost a time I wanted to be I came to tears because it was just such a pleasant experience with them, and it was just seamless, and it was just so helpful every time, right? And so the American experience is friendly, it's helpful, it's all those things, but oftentimes it's not very hospitable. And if we don't have a hospitable culture, how are we going to be able to get to know people beyond just the friendly waving of the hand, hi and goodbye? We're not. And so these differences are going to exist, but we're never going to develop a curiosity. We're never going to develop an understanding, and definitely not an appreciation and a celebration of those things if those relationships aren't forming. And the lack of hospitality in America, by and large, and a general sense, is, I think, a key reason why it's very difficult for these bridges to be built. Okay, the third reason why I think diversity is difficult is because we don't talk to strangers. We tell our kids, don't talk to strangers. We have children's books in my kids' rooms that are teaching them the lesson not to talk to strangers, right? It doesn't mean that all strangers are bad people. No. But kids don't know how to determine who is good and who is bad. So because of that, all strangers are off limits to them. I don't want you to be taking candy from anybody. I don't want you to be really smiling at people too much. I don't want my kids to be too open with strangers in order that they're protected. And so the same mentality actually is with us in society naturally. This isn't something that just gets carried with us because we're taught about it. I truly believe that this is just a natural reaction to things that we don't know, we're unfamiliar with, we don't have a level of trust, and so we're cautious around those things naturally. When there are a group of people that we don't know much about, we should be cautious around there. Sometimes ignorance is not bliss because you can get yourself in trouble. For instance, one time I was we lived in Wisconsin, about 2 hours outside of Chicago, 2 to 2.5 hours outside of Chicago. And so my parents did not like the city. They both grew up in very rural settings, and they didn't like going to the city. So they never took me to Chicago my entire life until I went to college. I went and experienced it myself. I said, my goodness, there's so many cool things in the city. I'd love for my parents to see it, at least my mom. So uh, a mother-son date. We went down to Chicago for the day, and we got on the L, and we went around to different places. And I remember, I don't exactly know what station that we got off at or where we were, but I remember getting out and we were looking for a place. This was before GPS, or at least I didn't have it at that time. And we were wandering around, and there was a car that drove up to us. An African American man leaned out the window and he says, "Where are you guys going?" And we said, "We're trying to get here and here and here." He's like, "You need to turn around right now, get back on that train, and go down to two more stops. You do not want to be walking around this place." And it was as far as I remember, it was in the afternoon. And so there was just this idea, like afternoon is a good time. But this man was at least telling us that we were not in a safe place. And for me, there was just an ignorance about that, right? There should have been more of a caution because I'm walking into areas that I may not be welcomed into. There was a time where again I was ignorant. I was studying overseas, and I was studying in Lithuania for 4 or 5 months for a semester. And so on our spring break trip, we went to Moscow for a week. It wasn't really that spring because it was the middle of it's still winter there in the middle of March. But while we were there, the whole group of us foreign exchange students were staying in a hostel. And so I had two buddies with me, and we were up at 1 a.m. in the morning, and we're just like, what do we do right now? Let's go. I saw there was a sundry shop, or like a little market at the end of like a 2 blocks down, a block over, where you could buy these little, like, just food stuff. And for me, I was buying different food items for my family members as souvenirs. They didn't want any buttons and magnets and T-shirts, so I thought I would give them a little taste of the places that I was visiting. And so 1 a.m. we walked down there in Moscow, in a place that we know nothing about. Walked down 2 blocks and over one. And while we were in there, we are buying different stuff, and I caught these people, these two guys that were looking in from the window. They were just oddly, like, looking in. It just didn't. It looked very suspicious. And so I had just been at the cash register, and I bought something, and I put it in my bag, and I went over to the other guys, and I said, guys, you need to put those things down right now. We're being watched. And he's like, Mark, what are you talking about? I mean, there's guys, I don't know how many of them are outside, but they're looking at us, and we need to be careful. And so we just need to leave right now. They already know that we have money, and I don't think this is going to be a good situation. I'm thinking that we're going to get mugged. And so we walk out that door. It's 1 a.m. in the morning. We we walk down the street. We have our backpacks on, and the guys, these there's three guys, and I'm not I like weigh like a buck 60, and these guys are just your stereotypical big muscular Russian guys. And so they all stand 6 inches or plus above all of us. And so we're walking out of this place, and they're out there talking to us. Hey, bonjour. Like, they're just speaking all these different languages of hello to be able to figure out what we speak. And I just said, guys, ignore them. Don't talk to them. And we walked down and we turned that corner. And I said, as soon as we turn this corner, guys, we just start running to our hostel. We turn the corner and we just book it. And these guys, as soon as they came around the corner and they saw that we were running, they started yelling and shouting and running after us. And we were running with all of our might to get to that hostel. And finally, we reached the door, pound, 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 pound on the door. And they were about, I don't know, 30 yards, 30 meters away from us. And that door opens, and the bodyguard, thank goodness, is this towering 7-foot bald man that was just a massive piece of humanity. He looks at them, he waves his finger at them, and then he shakes his head at us, and he tells us to walk inside. And I tell you that story because it's just a funny situation of, like, you should be cautious in life. You shouldn't be walking into areas or in cities that you are unfamiliar with, because harm could happen to you. And so, unlike people like me, I think general society and generally people have this idea that we need to be cautious. We need to be careful around things and people that we don't know. And societies and groups of people have been able to, perpetuate into the future because they've been able to safeguard themselves from potential harm of people that they don't know. They don't know if that neighboring group is good or bad, but or a group that they're visiting is good or bad, or a stranger that they meet is good or bad. But it's better to be cautious. I believe that is a natural tendency for us, and so most people are just guarded. So in order to have this ideal of integration that I've experienced in my own life, I I recognize that these natural tendencies exist. And so, although I want this ideal to occur, I want people to experience this. I want there to be harmony and integration and just, goodwill amongst people in our society and in my community that I live within. But I also recognize that doesn't come easy for a number of different reasons, of which I think some of them I've talked about today. It's not all inclusive, but I believe that there are these natural tendencies in us as people that create resistance and reluctancy in order to integrate well. The problem with this is that if these natural tendencies which are helpful in the beginning, are left unchecked, or they persist, and we have two different groups or two different cultures that live next to each other and never bridge those cautions, never try to introduce themselves to one another, never try to walk down that road to integration, where there's curiosity and there's an understanding, and trust is built through that, and then there is appreciation and celebration to integration. If there isn't that process that is taking place, what naturally is going to happen is bad things are going to happen. There's going to be stereotypes that are formed. Those stereotypes is going to lead into discrimination and even racism, and so, which is a natural progress. If trust isn't formed, if bridges are not built, and there is this separation between me and them, then the us and them mentality is solidified. And because I don't have any exposure to them, I don't have any interaction with them, I just have these pictures of caution that are taught to me, which are these negative stereotypes, right? Like, stereotypes, I think, are natural. They're just generalizations of these cues that we get from people that are general sentiments about another people. And I think generally there is some level of truth in them. But those stereotypes can go awfully negative. They can go awfully negative if to a very harmful place if we never take the time to try to bridge those gaps and to be able to establish a level of trust, a level of relationship where we can journey that road of integration together. And I think that's where we stand. We have a lot of natural tendencies that are up against us that cause us to stand separate from other cultures and people that exist around us in society and even in our own neighborhoods. And as a result, then we just play off of stereotypes that can oftentimes go negative in the way that we think about somebody. And as a result, it just leads to bad things. It leads to bad things. But I think there's hope. I think that the ideal can be, we can move towards it. I think we can move towards it. I've been able to move towards it in my life when I lived in an entirely, homogeneous context in southern Wisconsin, in this, where I was the fourth generation German. I lived, fourth generation to grow up in my family's home. Like, that kind of togetherness, I was able to find a way to begin to interact and have a curiosity that grew into an appreciation of characteristics that I celebrated, and I longed to be able to integrate those in my life. And the relationships that I've been able to form through that process and through my life have been incredibly meaningful and are the closest ones that I have today. So there is hope, and we'll talk more about that in a video to come. So thanks for being here with me. Thanks for being here with me. You guys are great.